Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Theosophical Society headquarters in London, England, a quick disclaimer for all of our talks. Please note that the views of our speakers and the presentations are not necessarily the views of the Society. Hang on, folks are coming in for Gary. I'm letting them in as we speak. Gary Kidgell is the organizing secretary of the Theosophical Society in Scotland and the librarian for the Theosophical Society in Scotland Charity. Gary has lectured extensively on esoteric subjects all over the world. Tonight's presentation considers the concept of archetypes in the light of the Theosophical teachings. Gary will lead us through these archetypes and the means by which they govern and conduct the evolutionary process. Gary is a dear friend, a metaphysician, a fellow dedicated student of Theosophy, and an extraordinary esoteric astrologer. He is also so accurate that some of us call him a modern-day Dr. D, and that's true. His most recent book is out now. It is called Greek Hero Myths, Pathways to Higher Consciousness. He is also the author of The Inner Journey, Pathways to the Higher Self. If you'd like to get in touch with Gary, his website is soul-centered-astrology.com. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get ready. Please welcome Gary Kidgell for Theosophy and Archetypes. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you very much, Anne. Not sure how I'll be able to live up to that wonderful introduction, but here we go then. The Orphic religion is generally acknowledged as the highest religious manifestation of the ancient world. Orphism was derived from literature ascribed to the mythical musician, poet, and prophet named Orpheus. The Orphic mysteries describe the presence of the river Lethe, being the waters of forgetfulness, within the underworld realm of Hades. And the incarnating soul would drink from this well, the well of Lethe, thereby losing sight of its divine origins. To address this matter, Orphic practitioners led deeply ascetic lives. They were strict vegetarians. They undertook these practices in the belief that in the afterlife, they would then merit the ability to drink from the well of the goddess Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne, memory and remembrance, rather than the well of Lethe. And on this basis, the aspirant would attain liberation from the wheel of rebirth, being reconnected with one's divine origins. In Greek myth, the supreme Olympian Zeus takes the form of a mortal shepherd and couples with Mnemosyne for 9 consecutive nights, giving birth to the 9 muses, the source of all knowledge. Now, in terms of interpreting myth, HPB cites 7 keys, these being spiritual, astronomical, psychical, physiological, anthropological, theogony, and anthropogeny. And we must bear in mind, of course, HPB's work was in the late 19th century, prior to significant developments in psychology. And considering the myth here of Zeus and Mnemosyne giving birth to the 9 muses, what I would call the psycho-spiritual symbolism is strikingly apparent. This represents a god and goddess engaged in intercourse, in embrace, the interaction between the transcendent principle, what in Theosophy we term Parabrahm, and the womb of creation, represented by various goddess figures in myth. Now, Theosophy informs us that our spiritual essence, the monad, which also equates with Zeus, adopts an instrument which we refer to as the soul, the higher self, so that it may fulfill its evolutionary objectives. The planes of consciousness relating to the soul, Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, contain the source of inspiration for the mechanism of the soul, the human personality. And the qualities of the soul and the planes of consciousness where it resides are represented here by the 9 muses. And when we tread the path in Orphic terms, we undertake spiritual disciplines as a means of unfolding the symbolic lotus petals of the soul on the basis that we will merit the ability to drink from the well of Mnemosyne. Now, many commentators consider Orphism to underlie a significant amount of Greek philosophy, including the works of Plato, who expounded his theory of forms or theory of ideas. In his Republic, Plato contrasts the world of our five senses with an intelligible realm comprised of these forms or ideas, where truth and real knowledge reside. Plato believed that long before our physical bodies existed, our souls inhabited a heavenly realm where they were directly acquainted with the forms or ideas. And he emphasized that real knowledge relating to these ideas cannot be gained through sensory experience, but rather through the memory of our initial acquaintance with the forms in heaven. The Platonic doctrine of recollection, or anamnesis, states that we are all born possessing such knowledge, and our realization of such knowledge in spiritual truth is contingent upon our discovery of it. This entails us removing the shackles depicted in Plato's famous cave analogy, where we can turn away from the phantom apparitions which appear on the cave wall, these representing, of course, the outer material world. We remove the shackles and turn around and see the individuals going about their work with a lit fire, this representing the causal realms. And of course, in the higher initiations described by Theosophy, one then is able to tread upwards and out of the cave, confront the sunlight of one's essence. But it's only by transcending the Maya, or illusion of the lower worlds, that one may become acquainted with Plato's forms or ideas, and not just becoming acquainted with them, but functioning in accord with their intent. This, of course, is the work of the initiate of Theosophy. And the wisdom teachings inform us that the soul or higher self, depicted here by the upright triangle, is the instrument of our spiritual essence, the monad. And the monad has undertaken an evolutionary descent as a means of unfolding hitherto latent qualities and developing what the wisdom teachings refer to as spiritual staying power, the ability to radiate and express spiritual qualities regardless of the circumstances into which one is placed. The soul or higher self resides on the planes of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, and it is part of a greater consciousness, what Theosophy calls the planetary logos. And when treading the path, the individual seeks to fuse personality and soul, and in doing so becomes aware of the intent of the soul, which is part of the intent of the planetary consciousness within which it is found. In spiritual development, we seek to build what is called the Antakarana, or rainbow bridge, depicted in the diagram by the link between the two triangles, the upper triangle of soul, the lower of personality. We do this through study, meditation, service, so that we may function as an effective spiritual instrument and become acquainted with Plato's forms or ideas. These relate to what we now refer to as archetypes. Archetype is a compound word derived from the Greek, arche meaning first or original, and typos meaning model or blow. And the archetypes guide and direct the destiny of all life on our planet and within our solar system. These divine ideas, as Jung described them as, are instrumental both in terms of involution, as the monad descends into matter, becoming more and more involved, and as we undertake the return journey to the source of our being. So archetypes permeate our psyche and our personal experiences. They precipitate into our consciousness through the symbolism of dreams, meditation, religious and spiritual experience, and in true creative endeavors, both in the arts and sciences. Later in this talk, I'm going to illustrate how archetypes are represented within our psyche in symbolic form. This is how we receive communication from the higher self. And it's important to be aware that the symbolism which the higher self chooses to communicate with us is based upon our existential psyche, what psychologists would refer to as our ex externa. As an example, a student of the Kabbalah will receive symbolic guidance and direction from the higher self through the symbolism related to the tree of life, the Sephiroth, the paths, and perhaps also the tarot. A Christian mystic will gain similar direction through the symbolism of Christianity. But we must also be aware that such symbolism is commonly interwoven with symbols from our everyday life, which the higher self may also elect to feed to us as a means of conveying its intent. And whatever spiritual system we embrace, if it's worth its salt, it will possess the capacity to elevate our consciousness beyond the system itself, whereby we are released into a state of pure consciousness. Mythology is a representation of archetypal energies, these forming part of the great evolutionary design. The symbolism of myth contains a wisdom of past cultures who sought to understand, to access, and to utilize these energies we refer to now as archetypes. And the archetypes were portrayed by various deities and mythic characters and the scenarios in which they were engaged in. The unconscious content of these archetypes, which underlie tales of myth, were elaborated by bards and storytellers in accordance with the traditions and collective psyche of their particular tribe or culture. Again, there would be an element of existential interpretation here too. Here is an image of the 19th century polymath, Adolf Bastian. He described archetypes in his concept of Elementargedanken, meaning elementary ideas. And he made a distinction between these and Volkergedanken, or folk ideas. The folk ideas being local, historic elaborations of the archetypes, being demonstrated by the myths and legends of various civilizations. And this is an abstract subject, but when we consider archetype symbols, and particularly in mythology, it's important to be aware that images and figures produced by the spontaneous myth-making faculty of the psyche are not to be understood simply as reproductions of something in the outer world. They are also expressions of inner psychic facts. Carl Jung developed and advanced the concept of archetypes, which he also referred to as divine ideas. In terms of mythology, interestingly, importantly, Jung emphasized that in myth there is an overlay of cultural material, unlike fairy tales, which are considerably less culture conscious, and that therefore fairy tales mirror the basic patterns of the psyche more clearly in depicting archetypal energies and various circumstances related to the human condition. The talk is entitled Theosophy and Archetypes. And when we consider this concept within the light of theosophical teachings, the divine ideas described by Jung, and as you've seen, Bastian, Plato, these relate to the intent of what we refer to as the solar logos, the great life which is functioning through our solar system, which we as monads are a part of. These archetypes are derived from the interaction of the seven rays, the seven great cosmic builders, whose energies underlie the functioning of our universe. These lie at a considerably deeper level than the archetypes described by Jung, although in accord with the esoteric axiom of as above, so below, we could also take the archetypes up to the cosmic plane. And we would trace them back to the 7 rays. Indeed, HPB refers to the 7 rays as the primordial 7, the Ani Buddhas, the Ahi or Logoi. And we should be aware that these 7 rays are great streams of divine energy. They interact at every conceivable frequency upon the various planes of creation, which they also govern and create, giving rise to planets, solar systems, and so on. They underlie the divine intent. So we could say they are the 7 ultimate archetypes. And the stanzas of Jeanne state, describing these, the primordial 7, the first 7 breaths of the dragon of wisdom, produce in their turn from their wholly circumgyrating breaths the fiery whirlwind, which we know as Fohat. And the intent of this great solar life, which we are all a part of, is in accord with that of Mahat, the universal cosmic mind, which HPB informs us equates with the creator god Brahma in the Hindu Puranas, Brahma being a symbol for the 3rd ray of active intelligence. So we've established then that archetypes, in terms of the consideration this evening, archetypes as divine ideas relate to the intent of the solar logos. And as I said earlier, in essence, we are monads engaged upon a long evolutionary journey as a means of unfolding hitherto latent qualities whilst engaged in physical form. And the initiation process that we must undergo entails us becoming attuned to the divine ideas, which Theosophy commonly describes as a divine plan. And on fulfilling the conditions of our long evolutionary journey, we contribute to the evolution of the great solar life which we're a part of. And when we tread the path, undertake various forms of spiritual development, we're seeking to fashion ourselves into an effective spiritual instrument, fulfilling the intent of the soul. This intent being in accord with the planetary consciousness which we are a part of, who also is seeking to express the divine ideas of the solar life within which it resides. So when we undertake the practices and disciplines of the path, when we eliminate feelings of separateness, we may become conscious of the greater being within which we may reside. Then we are eligible to share in its energies and powers via the soul, the higher self. And our ability to connect with the soul, and therefore to the intent of the planetary consciousness, is what Indian teachings refer to as yoga. Yogic practices enable us ultimately to attain what the Hindus call samadhi. This is described as satori in Zen Buddhism. And in the West, we tend to use the term cosmic consciousness here. And in doing so, we become aware of the intent of the greater being which we're a part of, as described in the higher initiations of Theosophy. And whilst I'm discussing yoga, again, in terms of the axiom as above, so below, just as we are seeking to connect to the soul and to fuse soul and personality, this yogic practice is going on at planetary and solar levels and beyond. Important to bear in mind also. So let's now consider various concepts relating to the archetypes. The only tangible evidence we receive in terms of the archetypes is when they project their symbols and images into our consciousness. We cannot observe them directly, but we can feel them, and we can certainly view their manifestations in the outer world. An example here would be the archetype or quality of love. Bearing in mind our solar system is on the 2nd ray of love wisdom. And when we express unconditional love, we are essentially aligning ourselves to the solar intent. So now let's have a look at these archetypes in terms of the human psyche, returning to our 7 planes diagram, this being the Annie Besant depiction of the 7 planes. So as divine ideas emanating from the great solar consciousness, which we as monads are a part of, so within our psyche, the archetypes emanate from the level of the monad. And in their pure form, they are first expressed on the planes of the soul, what we call Atma, Buddhi, and higher manas. They enter the human aura through the chakras, and if one is sufficiently developed spiritually, they can be expressed through the chakras above the diaphragm, which of course are related to the expression of spiritual qualities in the planes of consciousness where the soul resides. We also, of course, possess many instincts and drives. These are related to lower realms of the unconscious, and they're found in astral and lower mental substance. And these are expressed through chakras below the diaphragm. And as Jung stated, the average individual out there in the world is dominated by various instincts, desires, habits, impulses, prejudices, and complexes. So there's a reciprocity between the archetypes, divine ideas, and our instincts. As the energies of the archetypes stream down into the aura, emitting their energies downwards, there is a corresponding instinctual response. And similarly, if one is acting by instinct, they evoke a response at the level of the archetypes. So archetypes and instincts converge in human consciousness, and they merge by means of symbols and images. And when we tread the path, we are confronted by this metaphorical battleground between our instincts and desires on the one hand, and the spiritualizing forces of the archetypes on the other, symbolized very aptly in the Bhagavad Gita when the Pandavas and the Kauravas do battle. The Pandavas, the good and righteous brothers, symbolize the energies of the archetypes and qualities of the higher self, whilst the self-serving Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, symbolize the instincts and various psychological drives and everything associated with the lower nature. As I said, this is an abstract subject, and there are many archetypal energy reservoirs within the precincts of our planet. And these have been elaborated throughout history by our response to these divine ideas. All human experiences here are feelings, thoughts, understandings, all the highs and lows of human existence are deposited into giant reservoirs within the planetary precincts. Rupert Sheldrake outlined this in his concepts relating to morphic fields. If we repeat a particular action, a feeling or thought, we contribute to a morphic field which absorbs the energy, and it begins to reciprocate, feeding the energy back to us. So we create a morphic field by constantly repeating something. And it's important to be aware then there's this ongoing relationship between the divine ideas of the solar being, with the planetary being seeking to express these, and humanity as we respond to these. And this ongoing relationship, of course, assists in in our development and growth, but also the growth of the greater lives which we are a part of. Of course, there is a famous Shakespearean quote in As You Like It, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. And this is given a deeper perspective when we become aware of archetypal scripts, which we as members of humanity are constantly enacting. So when we study the archetypal dynamics of mythology and fairy tale, we should be aware that the drama depicted therein is a constant factor amidst humanity striving towards realizing our spiritual potential. Indeed, Jung described the archetypes as a museum of our species. And when we consider this in tandem with Sheldrake's concept of morphic resonance, we are aware that we are not actually simply following archetypal scripts, but we are actually assisting in creating them. And this has very important implications when we tread the path. We are seeking, via the higher self, to align ourselves to the divine ideas. And when we do this, we also access archetypal energies, including the efforts of those who have gone before us. And whilst we are treading the path, we are responding to the particular archetype, but also donating energy towards it, increasing the potency of the morphic field or energy reservoir. So when we tread the path, of course, we do this to benefit humanity and the planet itself. We become more effective instruments of spiritual expression, more effective in implementing the evolutionary plan for our planet, because we become receptive to the planes of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, divine persistent will, love, wisdom, abstract thought. And on this basis, we express these archetypes or divine ideas in their pure form. Here is an image of Roberto Assagioli, whose mother and wife were both theosophists. Assagioli studied under Sigmund Freud and also Carl Jung, and he created a structure known as his egg diagram as a means of illustrating the energies of the unconscious. Very valuable piece of work, in my opinion. You can see the egg diagram on the left and the 7 planes on the right. Now, if we have a look at the egg diagram, if we look at the outer rim of the egg, we'll see it as comprised of a dotted line. This outside, number 7, is the energies of the unconscious, the various planes of existence. The dotted line indicates that these energies come into our psyche, but also we donate energies outwards. It is compartmentalized into numbers 1, 2, and 3. Again, you will notice there are dotted lines here, indicating the porous nature of the psyche. Level 1 is the lower unconscious, level 2, the middle unconscious, level 3, the superconscious. And these aspects of the psyche do not function in an exclusive manner. There is interaction. Of course, I'm trying to represent something, or sorry, Assagioli is trying to represent something multidimensional within a 2D structure. But in terms of quantum physics, we would say there is a certain superpositioning within the various regions of Assagioli's egg. So if we look at number 6 on the egg, this is the soul or higher self as the instrument of the monad. Assagioli described it as the self, using the same term as Jung, which equates with the Hindu Atman. And when we tread the path, we seek to construct the Antakarana, as I said earlier, as a means of accessing the spiritual planes, or what is depicted here as the superconscious. I mentioned before, qualities reside there such as divine persistent will, compassion, unconditional love, empathy, courage, abstract thought. And this is how we realize our spiritual potential. I spoke of the muses earlier, and they are a wonderful depiction of the superconscious. To be inspired by the muses means that one has access to the spiritual planes of consciousness. And of course, true artists, musicians, poets, inventors, true scientists, and so on, are able, perhaps even temporarily, to access this particular realm. This is where true creativity resides. If we return to the diagram to level 1, the lower unconscious, this represents one's personal psychological past in the form primarily of negative experiences, long forgotten memories, repressed complexes, feelings of fear, shame, guilt, anger, and despair, which these being in most people consigned below the surface level of awareness. Also at level 1, you would find the id of Sigmund Freud, the shadow of Jung, and Theosophy. We talk of the dweller on the threshold, the sum total of our personality characteristics over our many lives, which we must overcome to reveal the angel of this shining presence, the soul, the highest self. And the dweller is particularly adept at utilizing this realm, challenging us in terms of further progress on the path. But as Madame Blavatsky said, when one treads a path, all that is good and all that is evil surface. And if we are going to access level 3, the superconscious, we must first deal with level 1, the lower unconscious. And in mythology, this realm is depicted by various dragons, arch-villains, hideous monsters, and so on, which the hero must overcome. As an example, in Greek myth, the questing hero Perseus had to overcome Medusa, symbolizing the most terrifying aspects of the monad's journey through matter. He overcomes Medusa through the possession of a mirror shield, which he can view her reflection, thus to avoid being turned to stone. He is then able to decapitate her. The mirror shield is, of course, symbol of the fully purified personality, capable of reflecting the light of the soul, the higher self. It is only when we do that that we can deal with the most negative, most terrifying aspects of the dweller on the threshold and the energies of the lower unconscious. And when Perseus succeeds, Pegasus arises, the winged horse, symbolizing the ability to ascend to the superconscious realms. Of course, in Greek myth, it would be the Olympian heights. Interestingly, when Pegasus appears, he strikes the earth with his hoof, creating the Pierian spring, being known as the spring of the muses, all very symbolic, of course. Returning to our diagram, if you look at the middle level, numbers 4 and 5. 5 is the human personality, a conscious self, and 4, the circle within the egg, is our ordinary level of awareness. And of course, when we tread the path, we extend that, looking to get up to 3 via the Antakarana, but also having to deal with all that is down here in 1. Again, bringing to mind HBT's famous quote about all good and all evil surfacing when we tread the path. This is found, numbers 4 and 5, within level 2, what Assagioli called the middle unconscious, which is related basically to our everyday lives, the everyday skills that we develop, everyday thoughts and feelings and so on. And of course, this is very important in terms of human development. All our various motor skills, our technical skills, etc., are related to energy reservoirs at this particular level and the associated morphic fields which have been created. For treading the path, we seek to extricate ourselves from this particular level so that we can access the superconscious. And this is done by constructing the Antakarana or rainbow bridge. We basically seek to express what Plato described as truth, beauty, and goodness, these being archetypes themselves, related to the 3 rays, truth to ray 1 of will and power, beauty to ray 2 of love, wisdom, and goodness to ray 3 of active intelligence. And when we tread the path, we're particularly concerned with our relationship to the archetype of wholeness. Jung described this as the objective of his individuation process. You see on the left, I've chosen the Theosophical Quest, and The interlaced triangles in the center, representative of the soul-infused personality, where the antakarana ceases to exist because soul and personality function as one. The central ankh depicting the triumph of spirit over matter. This all occurring within the coiled serpent and Antashesha, the serpent which when coils gives rise to manifestation, and we see the swastika or fohat at the top, beyond that the Om, the sounding of the note of creation. The archetype of wholeness. Interestingly, I took the Hindu image of the Sri Yantra, or great shape, to go beside the theosophical image, because that also is based on the fusion of two triangles. And in terms of treading the path and effecting wholeness, this is an existential matter. We have our own requirements here. Our response to the energies of the archetypes on the spiritual planes is dependent upon our own psyche, as revealed by our astrological natal chart, the various rays governing our constitution, and of course, our experiences going back over many lives, recorded in structures known as life atoms or permanent atoms. Another particularly important archetype is that of meaning. I've taken this quote from the SD, which many of you will be familiar with, because meaning can ultimately be traced back to the transcendent principle and understanding of the Om. But in terms of our psyche, meaning is very important. It's an archetype which constantly contributes energies into the psyche through the thoughts we elaborate, the words we utter, the actions we perform. And of course, meaning is something else which is existential. When we study a poem, listen to a piece of music, or observe a piece of art, this can inspire us, can take us to an elevated level of consciousness. However, it's the meaning here which conveys the reality of it to us, not simply the meaning which the creator of the piece of work intended to convey, but what it means to the perceiver. It's not what the creator of the work meant, that is their reality. It's what the work means to us, which is our reality. And as I said, we can trace this back to the omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. I have an image of Leadbeater here. The reason is because, very importantly, archetypes surface in our consciousness in symbolic form through dreams and meditations. And dreams are common to the entire human race. They provide the higher self with the perfect opportunity to impress the personality when the various bodies of the personality, mental, astral, and physical, are still and quiescent. Jung described dreams as the soil from which most symbols originally grow. And if we can understand the symbolism communicated to us through our dreams, we can obtain guidance and direction from the higher self, leading a spiritually effective existence. Leadbeater stated that the higher self often impresses its ideas upon the personality in dreams using sets of symbols. And an idea which would require many words to be expressed is perfectly conveyed by a single symbolical image. So the soul seeks to unite us with its intent, and does so through symbolism. The aspect of the soul which seeks to achieve this is known as the psychopomp. In Greek myth, the psychopomp is symbolized by Hermes, the messenger of the gods, most appropriately, I would say. The ancient Egyptians symbolized the psychopomp through Thoth, their god of wisdom, the Hindus by Ganesha, the remover of obstacles. And the psychopomp leads us into the realms of the unconscious. We experience its subjective nature through art, music, poetry, and other creative pursuits. And again, we experience it existentially in our own way. And initially, the inner guide tends to manifest in dream scenarios as a member of the opposite sex, what Jung describes as the anima for males and the animus for females. Here we see an image of a mermaid by the water, beckoning the male into the unconscious for a process of exploration, leading to spiritual growth. And on the right, we see a handsome knight clad in armor with the maiden beside him, a heroic figure who can lead her to higher states of consciousness, overcoming various obstacles which confront her upon our way. After this phase of the psychopomp's expression, its role is very often assumed by a spiritual mentor or guru, who will often appear as a symbol in dreams and meditation, advising one of what course of action to take. I have chosen here the image of the great Bulgarian master Peter Dunov because I have a connection with the country. The final phase of the psychopomp is when one locates their own existential guide. This is Philemon, Jung's existential guide. I believe that image comes from the cover of Jung's Red Book. This, of course, is a very abstract subject. And when we consider symbolism, we must be aware of the limitations of our lower mind. Jung informs us that the intellect is only a part of the psyche and is insufficient in terms of understanding the much greater whole of which we are a part of. The psyche, of course, reaching immeasurably beyond the boundaries of everyday waking consciousness. And of course, we describe this in Theosophy with our various diagrams of the planes. So returning again to the 7 planes, the lower mind or intellect is represented by the 4 lower subplanes of the mental plane, called lower mental. And the 3 upper planes relate to abstract thought or higher manas, the realm of consciousness where Plato's forms or ideas reside. And abstract thought is the current frontier in human consciousness. It relates to thought processes which do not concern our survival instincts nor the pursuit of our various desires. We develop abstract thought through studying the wisdom teachings, philosophy, metaphysics, literature, poetry, and particularly through the study of symbolism of myth and the imagery found in dreams and meditation. And by doing this, we separate the lower mind from the astral body, relieving it of what the Indian teachings call kama manas, or mind contaminated by desire. We disentangle from the desire nature and begin to then transmute the expression of chakra energies, where those of the solar plexus are expressed through the heart and the sacral through those of the throat. Symbolism then, very, very important in terms of getting to grips with the archetypes and discovering the hidden depths of our psyche. Whenever we think, we do so in a symbolic manner. Streams of images will enter our mind, and these determine the flow of our thoughts. So symbolic language represents a natural way in which the soul can communicate with us. And all of the images which the higher self feeds to us are derived from our personal experiences in the outer world. I mentioned this earlier, the ex externa described in modern psychology. The ancients said that memory is the mother of the muses. And we should be aware that this ex externa, our experiences, provide the soul with a lexicon in which it can communicate with us and offer us meaning, guidance, and direction. The word symbol is a compound one, derived from the Greek word symbolon. Sim means together, and bolon means thrown. That which has been thrown together. This term was originally used to represent two halves of an object, such as a stick or coin, which was broken in half by two parties who had entered into a contract, each retaining the separate pieces. When the contract was fulfilled, the two objects were placed together, and the wholeness of the object was then restored. The symbol was thus the missing part of an object, which, if placed together with its partner, had its original wholeness restored. And of course, the highest self uses symbolic language to restore our own wholeness of being, enabling us to function at the level of abstract thought and leading us to that missing part within the soul, the highest. Madame Blavatsky informs us that the mystery language of Senza, which forms the basis for the stanzas of Jeanne, the core of the secret doctrine, is related to symbolism. She describes it as the secret sacerdotal tongue from the words of the divine beings who dictated it to the sons of light in Central Asia at the very beginning of the fifth, our race, for there was a time when its language, the Senza, was known to the initiates of every nation. And John Algeo, ex-vice president of our organization, he states a mystery language is what we now call symbolism. It speaks to our unconscious minds and can only be imperfectly translated into ordinary logical language. He proceeds to outline two principal types of archetypal symbols, those found in myths and fairy tales, allegories and parables, alchemical recipes, and biblical history, stories that have a hidden meaning underneath the obvious narrative, stories that bear a double interpretation. And B, a visual representation of those archetypal symbols in pictographs or hieroglyphic and cipher-like characters, whose meaning the initiated can interpret independently of any language. So this is interesting, and if I may humbly state, in relation to my studies of Theosophy and Jung, we must also consider the symbols fed to us in dreams and meditation, and in what Jung describes as synchronicities, where there is a concurrence between what is going on in here subjectively and an event which happens in the outer world. This is probably my favorite definition of a symbol coming from Jung, who states any word or image is symbolic or becomes a symbol when it implies something more than its obvious and immediate meaning. There's a wider unconscious aspect that is never precisely defined or fully explained. As the mind explores a symbol, it is led to ideas that lie beyond the grasp of reason. Now, on the left, you will see a sign representing something which we all know. It conveys abstract meaning. Whereas a symbol indicates something unknown or mysterious. The meaning is dynamic and subjective, and the meaning can change. And when we interpret symbols, we must be aware they have different layers of meaning, and how the same symbol can offer different or existential meaning to the one who perceives it. And this meaning can change according to the context in which it is placed. Symbols are dynamic. When we focus upon a symbol, it begins to change. It adapts itself to our requirements in consciousness. It relates to the existential part of our psyche. And we can never exhaust the meaning of a symbol. As Jung said, a symbol cannot be drained of its meaning. Rather, it adapts itself to our requirements at any given time. And anyone who has embarked upon a serious study of their own dream symbolism or that of others is aware that there is a strong contextual element here. Whilst there are certain aspects of dreams, such as flying, falling, growing infinitely large or small, these too must be considered within the context of the dream. So it's a challenging process, the interpretation of symbolism, but we do this by cultivating the quality of abstract thought. As I said, it's a frontier of human consciousness. It helps greatly if we keep a spiritual diary or dream diary, recording various dreams. It's very interesting to go back and read one's spiritual diary, perhaps over a 6-month period or even a 5-year period, and see certain themes emerging in terms of the dreams which come to us. So I've said then that symbols are representations of archetypes, and when we seek to interpret them, their meaning can change. And this interpretation must always be based upon context. Nevertheless, there are symbols which do possess a general meaning, such as the symbol of the cave, usually representing something deep and obscured within, perhaps suggesting we engage in a process of withdrawal. There is the cave of the heart, which we enter into in meditation. Two very common contemporary symbols for the human personality are the motor car and the house. I have a Libra ascendant in my astrology chart, which rules cars. It's very common for me to have dreams about cars as a symbol of my personality. Are we able to drive the car effectively? Are we going in the right direction? Is our driving safe? When I first made a commitment to the wisdom teachings, I actually dreamt of a 1960s E-type Jaguar, colored indigo, color of the second ray, the ray of my soul. I was not in the car, I was looking at the car and saying to myself, how on earth am I going to learn to drive this? And I think that is a very, very powerful symbol in terms of the challenges of the spiritual path. Considering the symbolism of the house for the personality, what condition is the house in? Is it resplendent and clean? Is it dilapidated, in need of a makeover? Perhaps we are in the kitchen, symbolizing spiritual food which we can give out to others, or perhaps alluding to the alchemical process with the oven and transformation by fire. Are we proceeding to the attic, the highest point of the house where the higher self resides, and so on? So symbolism is an abstract matter, but very fruitful. And in this lecture, of course, I'm relating symbols to archetypes as Jung did. In my opinion, this was the most important piece of work of the 20th century in terms of developing the human condition. And now I'm going to look at a particular myth as an illustration of the spiritual path. Before doing so, I missed my notes here. My previous mentor, Douglas Baker, he devised a form of esoteric astrology to function as a key to the mysteries for the 21st century, where he related the symbols of everyday life to the symbols found in astrological signs and glyphs. And on this basis, he provided a means of interpreting dreams and symbolism in general through one's astrological chart. This functioning, well, I believe what Baker was trying to do was effectively create a Rosetta Stone of the unconscious, just as a Rosetta Stone enabled students of hieroglyphics to interpret them. So he created a form of astrology related to interpreting the symbolism which the higher self passes to the personality. And on this basis, one can lead a spiritually effective life. In terms of the spiritual path, I tend to use this quote in a few of my talks, a Blavatsky quote, which I really love. I've shortened it this time. There is a road steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road, and it leads to the very heart of our universe. And when we tread the spiritual path, this is the road which we traverse. We respond to the promptings within. and we awaken to our destiny, our purpose, the purpose of our incarnation. Here is an image of the great 20th century student of myth, Joseph Campbell. Wrote many books, but probably his most famous one is A Hero with 1,000 Faces, taking a comparative approach towards hero myths, just as Theosophy takes a comparative approach towards various religions and esoteric teachings, perceiving the underlying truth which permeates all of these. And he illustrates how the mythical heroes respond to what he called the call to adventure. This is when we awaken to the spiritual path. They then enter distant and dangerous lands, which symbolize the uncharted realms of the human psyche. They undergo many tests and trials here, which determine their right to proceed and ultimately to attain the goal of initiation, just as we do when we seek the initiations described by Theosophy. Then Campbell states, when one attains initiation, one returns to the rank and file of humanity, offering the lessons of their illumination to others as an act of service. And in Theosophy, we talk of the initiate climbing the symbolic cliff face of the mountain, receiving a portion of the divine plan, and then enacting it in the world. These things are not a million miles apart. C.S. Lewis famously stated, myth is the isthmus which connects a peninsular world of thought with that vast continent we really belong to. An isthmus connects two pieces of land, otherwise separated by water. The peninsular world of thought connected with that vast continent we really belong to. Lewis is, of course, referring to the capacity of myth in terms of constructing the Antakarana, or Rainbow Bridge. And when we consider myth, we must engage with the myth on our terms. Ask ourselves what the symbols mean to us. As an example, we have Heracles overcoming the Hydra. Now, your Hydra, symbolic of the lower nature and depths of the psyches, may take a very different form to mine. But if we are going to lead spiritually effective lives through studying myth, then we relate that symbol to our particular life. This is important. So I'm now going to look at a particular myth as a representation of the extreme tests and glorious rewards of treading the path and obtaining initiation. Here is an image of the Norse tree of life, Yggdrasil. It grows out of the well of Urd, a pool whose fathomless depths hold the most powerful forces within the cosmos. In theosophical terms, we would say the well of Urd relates to the cosmic planes above our cosmic physical plane within which we operate. The beings here include the Norns, three sagacious maidens who create the fates of all beings by carving runes, these are the Norse representation of archetypes, into the trunk of Yggdrasil. The symbols then carry the intent throughout the tree, affecting its 9 worlds. Odin rides his horse slightly until he reaches Yggdrasil. He views the Norns at work, and this ignites a great thirst within for true knowledge and to obtain the secrets of the runes. And to obtain knowledge, he must visit the well of Mimir. You see this on the left. This is a well which nourishes the cosmic ash, feeds the world tree. And Mimir possesses unparalleled knowledge as he is able to drink from the well. And if Odin is to receive this knowledge, he must sacrifice an eye. Of course, the wisdom teachings symbolize the soul as a lotus-like structure. We use the symbolic number 777 for the number of lives required to unfold its lotus petals. 700 lives for the knowledge petals, 70 for the love petals, and then the last 7 to unfold the sacrifice petals, where the initiate undergoes immense personal sacrifice for the benefit of humanity and the planet. So Odin must sacrifice an eye. Now, to me, there are different ways of looking at this. It could mean sacrificing one's perception of the outer world and the associated Maya or illusion, and becoming aware of the one life which functions through all forms. There is also an allusion to the opening of the third eye. If thine eye be single, thy body will be filled with light, as they say in the Bible. So Odin obtains the knowledge through drinking from the well of Mimir, and he then seeks to ascertain the ultimate wisdom of the runes. And these are only revealed to those who prove themselves worthy. Just as the higher self will only infuse us with its energies when we prove ourselves worthy, overcoming the many challenges which confront us on the path, dispensing with the karma accumulated over many lives. So to achieve the knowledge of the runes, Odin hangs himself from a branch of Yggdrasil, pierces himself with a spear, and peers downwards into the shadowy abyss below. He does not allow any of the other gods to help him, staring downwards, calling to the runes. Because this is rather like Christ on the cross, or the dark night of the soul described by St. John the Mystic, and also the Buddha, or Prince Siddhartha rather, in the temptations of Kama Mara before attaining Buddhahood. And Odin hangs for 9 nights on Yggdrasil, wavering on the precipice between the living and the dead. His insight and appreciation of his inner or true nature increasing gradually, and finally, due to his immense sacrifice, he is able to perceive the runes and understand their great secrets. This, of course, referring to the process of initiation. And he ends his ordeal with a cry of exultation, carving the runes into the trunk with his sword. Interestingly, the word rune is related to the German word raunen, meaning to whisper. The runes whisper the wisdom of their archetypal energies to the initiated. Hindu teachings use the Sanskrit word shruti, meaning that which is heard, to refer to their most sacred text. The word Kabbalah means received. So as a result of this great sacrifice, Odin discovers the runes and obtains their secrets. He is then able to use the forces of the runes for the benefit of the gods and humanity, initiating others into their secrets. So in obtaining the runes are used for the benefit of humanity and the gods. This, in Theosophy, we talk of the initiate given a portion of the divine plan. Jung talks of when one attains individuation or wholeness, one then consciously expresses the energies of the archetypes, because in Theosophy, when we undergo these higher initiations, we become more attuned to the intent of the greater lives which we are part of, planetary and solar, because we are infused by the energies of the soul and ultimately the energies of the monad.